So, just for starting, I could cut this out. We have monitoring headphones if you want to use them. Most people don't. But they're there to look as though I know what I'm doing.
Okay.
But we were just getting off on a good topic. You're an engineer at International Knife and Saw. You guys, and you're over Slater department. And
Yeah.
I do paper mill stuff myself with CP Tech. I don't know why they don't buy from IKS. You're just like down the road, but they get it from. Well, I guess I shouldn't get like onto airing who they get, because people get really like defensive over how people run their business. But you said you worked at Sunoco for a time in the Sunoco's prototyping lab.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was real interesting. I got to hear about this.
It's super interesting. Well, first of all, prototype, is the first of the first. And so that's what we did. And so let's get back to what you were talking about earlier, the tubes.
Paper tubes, yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
So one of the most interesting machines that we built, and you got to realize it was really super interesting for me. This was late teens, early 20s. So, I was just getting into the field and really excited. But so, yes, let's talk about this project. 24 ply.
Okay, so that's a thick tube.
Yes, really thick tube. And so,
It's a heavy roll.
Yes.
Yeah.
We built it from scratch. And so you had 12 stations, 2 rolls on each station. I said 24. Maybe it's 12 ply. Maybe 12. 6 stations, 2 rolls on each station. But we built the process from building the stations that holds the rolls, the splicing machines, the glue pot.
Right.
Yeah.
So the tubes themselves, I've seen it at one of the vendors, is they slice usually like thick brown stock into ribbons. It comes in on a roll, which is weird, which is like, I guess...
It comes in a roll.
It comes in a roll. It's a conversion, right? It's a conversion operation. Comes in on a roll. It has a tube in it.
Has a tube.
Right. So it's like
yeah.
it's like the cycle of tube. It's like the tube makes the...
Yeah.
So
who makes the tube for the
first
tube making process?
Who made the first tube? That's what I gotta know. There's gotta be someone who started out with the first paper tube.
Yeah.
But so the roll gets sliced into ribbons. It goes from ribbons into glue pot and on a wrap.
Well, yes, it goes into the glue pot. Like I said, whether it's 6 ply, 10 ply, however many plies it is, goes into it all meets together, and it's rolled up and travels along, a train type system where it's chopped off, however long or whatever.
And is it like a continuous process where the plies are continually getting rolled, and then there's an intermittent chop?
Yeah,
on the end.
Continuously.
So it's almost it's not like I guess as it comes off the primary roll where it's getting chopped, it's almost like an extrusion process where it's kind of coming off. I guess it would be like a mandrel in the center. It cures. It keeps pushing. And then after the mandrel ends, it gets cut.
Yeah,
the length.
Got the mandrel there.
At that mandrel, it looks almost like an extrusion process. That's wild. So the mandrel actually has to have bracing like all the way back here, because you have to start the mandrel can't just be a steel core floating in air. It has to be structurally braced somewhere.
Yeah.
So how long is that mandrel?
I've seen different lengths. It's according to the process that you're doing, different lengths.
But it's got to be long enough for the glue to dry and for the things to... I mean, are they like heating it as it...
Well, we had pots where it also had a heating process.
Okay.
That helped the glue dry faster.
Right, because the glue is probably going to be a PVA emulsion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to drive out the water and be left with PVA.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll also probably have, it's an emulsion, so it has a surfactant in there, and it might also have a builder, something to thicken it. That's probably going to be.
Yep.
That's probably going to be. It's the same gelling agent. It's a clay. I hate like seeing the thing in my head,
Yeah.
but not being able to tell you what it's. They use it to sop up oil. It's used in kitty litter. It's.
Now you got me. I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it.
Bentonite clay. There we go. Oh my gosh, took me forever. Bentonite clay. That's a really common thickener for PVA emulsions because it can come in like a super fine powder, and they build up a PVA emulsion glue, and that's what's probably in the glue pot is that type thing. So you have the heater makes sense because you have to drive off the water.
Yep.
And you also want to make sure it doesn't dry unevenly, right? So if it's rotating, the heater works, but. I'd have to see. I haven't looked at the
Now, the heater at that time, now this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, so the heater thing was a new process. Now, when you talk about the mandrel system, the way they originally did it, yeah, they had different size mandrels because, you got to give time for the glue to dry, as you said.
Yep.
Now, we built a cone machine. A cone is, the cones were... they wrap yarn on.
I haven't seen a cone machine. I haven't seen the cones either. I only know paper rolls. I know the cores. And I also know the stoppers they shove in the cores.
Yeah.
The stoppers are just like they're wood chips that they press in with glue, and it's a press. And
Is that what they do now versus what they used to do?
I've only been in the industry for like a year, a little over a year, so I haven't seen how they used to do it. But the cores they knock, so there's the paper core, and on both ends of the paper core they knock in a plug, and the plug is like this. It's like press board.
Okay.
That stuff. And
The cone machine worked just like the tube machine,
okay.
except for being wrapped around the mandrel and being a straight tube. It was shaped like a cone, but the process is still the same. They had to dry and all those kind of things.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it popped off, right? So
Yeah.
you have to wrap around the cone and they'd maybe blast it off with air.
Yeah.
What do they use the cones for?
Yarn.
Yarn.
Back
Okay.
then yarn was the thing. Yeah. My mother was a seamstress. She worked in a lot of sewing factories, so I actually seen some situation where the cones had the yarn wrapped around it.
I saw
We was
those.
used in the field, huh?
You see him and recognize him? I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I remember that. But yeah. And I remember we built a modern day. When I say modern day, like I say, in the early 2000s, for what Sunoco had been using, this was the new technology for where they sold these too, though.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, they sold these. Yeah, so they
that's
sold
one of
these.
the beautiful things about Sunoco. Sunoco, people don't really appreciate the genius of how they run their business.
Exactly.
First off, Sunoco in Hartsville, paper machine number 10.
Yep,
Yeah,
I know them 10. Yeah,
that machine has been running continuously since parts of it since the 50s. Other
Yep.
parts we don't know because it was from.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this though: who owns it now? Though?
Who owns the Sunoco? Who owns?
No, that's Sunoco. That's parts of during this time, this era I was there. Parts of it was being sold off. There was a couple of those big cone machines like number 10 that was owned by the Chinese.
Really, I didn't know that about Sunoco.
Parts of it was sold off. Now, I'd heard everything had kind of come back together, and Sunoco was in charge.
So Sunoco's basically like contract manufacturing for other people who own the particular lines.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's
interesting.
been crazy because that's some messed up stuff.
Exactly. To me, that was messed up because I always believed in America, American made, and then this huge country. Because the people that I worked for now, I worked in the prototype lab, but part of the lab that I worked in, part of us we stayed there and we worked at Sunoco. The other part, they traveled to the plants all over the country. So all over the world actually. Sunoco had companies,
met
plants
those
all
guys.
over.
There's also independent guys who work out of their house that do that and make
Yeah.
killings because they're
Yeah.
just there's really no one in the world that's like an
Yep.
expert on like just dryer, like
Yeah.
this one, like the tail cutter end of the dryers,
Yep.
or trim shoots, right? The
Exactly.
trim shoot guy. Like
Yeah.
you see it. I've seen that. I've done shutdowns at different types of mills, different places, International Paper and Pratt Mills, Sunoco Mills, different other types of stuff. And I've seen the same trim shoot guy on more than once because they schedule their shutdowns. And all the contractors come in during the big shutdown days. So we work winders, so I do knife holder mostly. Knife holders, basically, like my shutdown life is if it's moving and it's not supposed to, then I replace the brake cylinder on the carriage, and if it's not moving and it is supposed to, then I replace the bearings. And if the knife is not going down, then I need to fix downstroke. If it's not side loading, then I need to fix side load. So I know all the knife holders. I mean, I'm vastly like biased in terms of which knife holders I tolerate. So if I'm in there as a technician, I become a salesperson like that.
Yeah.
If someone's not using my preferred knife holder, like I am a Tidland sales guy better than Tidland's sales guys. I'll go there because I have to deal, like, I don't think that the Tidland salespeople actually have to like deal with Mario Kata. I'm not saying anything bad about those guys, but like Mario Kata's knife holders, I get to geek out because right?
Yeah.
But Mario Kata's knife holders have field fit like $700 bearings with a freaking nylon bushing in there, and those last for I don't know, maybe 1,000 hours, and then they're out of tolerance. And if you have more than like a half-degree cant or something like that, and you're out of tolerance, and you can't really cut paper, and it'll chowder on you.
Yeah.
So, and you'll introduce vibration, you'll get blade wear, and if you get really, really bad blade wear, then you got paper chips or you got metal chips in your finished product, possibly. Though metal chips are more of an issue like at the wet end, right? So if you get metal chips in the wet end, then it's in the actual web of the paper, and you can't deal with it at that point. You have to just throw the paper out because you can't recycle that paper because it's got the metal chips in there.
Exactly.
So, not so much at the winder, right? Like if you chowder chips into something at the winder, then it gets blown off with compressed air or somewhere at the converting mill down the line for your customer. It's not in the web. So, yeah, I like the paper industry. I think I'd like steel more, but I ended up in paper. I'm more of a metallurgist guy. I like metallurgy a lot.
I'm really the same. 'Cause like I started out with paper,
Yeah.
and when I got into like now, the shear blade business and things, metal cutting metal is very interesting.
Yeah. I've seen the aluminum knives. So have you seen how aluminum like radiators are made? There's a shear knife on a billet that will just shear straight through get a perfect sheet of aluminum, then move it up to make a fin, and it just repeats this process, and it makes fins of aluminum.
Wow.
I guess that's a radiator that they were making or parts of it, but that like blows my mind that that's got to be like a 10100 tool steel that has to be ultra hard to make multiple cuts. But then again, because of the motion where it actually like bends up the fins, like it can't be that hard because it's got to have a little bit of toughness. So it probably can't be a 10100. It's got to be like, it's not 1040 because it's got to be harder than that. It could be 1040 quenched. If it was 1040 annealed and then quenched, then it would be plenty hard and still have a little bit of toughness.
Yeah. Well, we work with 1040.
1040 is the steel. If you think of steel, you're thinking of 1040 steel.
Yeah. Pretty hard.
Mild, cold rolled steel, and then afterwards you get a sometimes like over on that side of SIMT. There's Icon Weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Have you checked them out?
I know some of the guys that's over there. I think I can't remember his name now.
Sullivan.
Huh?
Sullivan's the guy who runs Icon.
Do you know Kevin Broach?
I don't know Kevin. That
Kevin
sounds
has
familiar.
something. He has a business that he's working with out here also. I know Kevin.
Binomo or Ben Nomo is in here. Automag is in here. ESOP has a plant, or not a plant, but a little office that keeps. Man, ESOP. I wanted to get your point on that because I know you and I mostly agree on the Made in America stuff, but you mentioned your mom worked in textiles.
Yeah.
That has really hit the Carolinas hard because this was like the textile capital of the world for generations, and that left like quick, fast, and in a hurry. Unions came in, and the incentives that, like, I'm not against unions actually. Like, I think if workers want to organize and try to have a relationship with their management, and that can be a good thing. But man, when you change the topology of all the incentives to make people go overseas, and then unions come in, unions get the blame for like industry leaving. It's like, nah, dude, our policy screwed us.
Yeah, that's what screwed us. Now, I agree with you. I don't have a problem with unions. I believe you do what works for you. And I think in like some of the situations like up north where we're seeing a lot of unions at, it worked. But here's the thing, and I thought about this after we got the phone, something I was thinking about as we got the phone today, is whenever man or we, us people, get involved in something, we mess it up. It can start out a good thing, a great thing, but then you got greedy people, you got, people with their own agendas, and then things get off track. But I think that's my opinion with the unions. What happened? It became a money thing.
Yeah.
But I believe in the era when it was the thing, and everybody, because I'm not gonna call a name, but I know a company right here in Florence, fairly new, probably here for the last 20 years now. And I remember when they wanted to bring the union in, So I think it works where it works. Everybody's not the same. But when people take advantage of the system or try to, when it becomes a money thing or whatever it can be.
Nothing lasts. There's a natural cycle of, birth, life, growth, peak, stagnation, decline.
Yeah.
That just happens. It's unfair to expect anything to be the exception to that general rule. So, yeah, of course, unions had their peak.
But the question is, what is the cause of that? Here's why I said man. People, not us literally,
that's
but
a good question.
People.
But like,
you know what I'm saying? Here's why I said that. Can we go back to the religion point for a second, like we were talking about today?
Go right ahead. Whatever you want to talk about. That's my one rule, is that you just have to not be putting on a performance. That's why I have to remind myself this is not a performance.
Oh no,
I do.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, everything goes. I have no restrictions.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking about religion, had a great conversation earlier today. So when I say when people or man or when we get involved, it can be a great idea and it'll work. But then when we get involved, there becomes motives now. And so my motive now is, instead of me being interested in because I care for people or this is my agenda changes, now it becomes money. And let me give you a couple of examples of that. Here's what somebody asks me all the time. They're like, well, what do you think about preachers and pastors in churches and things like that? When Jesus told his disciples, he said, on this rock I will build my church. The church he was talking about was a genuine thing, a great thing, an awesome thing for the Christians to meet together and, and worship together in a corporate manner. I think worship is a separate thing for us to do day to day on our own, but it's a thing. Church is a corporate thing. So here's the thing. So when the church Jesus was talking about was a great thing, but now you got people question, well, I don't think preachers, I think the church is crooked or the church is taking advantage or the church is this. Yeah, but as people.
Right.
People mess things up. But what God at first intended for things to be, or genuinely intended for something to be, was the correct manner he meant for it to be in. But when we get involved, let's talk about back to the union thing, I think it was a great thing. It was a genuine thing, and did a lot of great. But when people come to a place of, okay, well, my agenda has changed, or
People get complacent and greedy on both
greedy.
sides
There you
of
go.
that.
That's the next word I want to
And
use.
another thing, okay, so there's two things that you covered a lot of ground. That's a lot to think about. One thing is that corrupting influence of man
There you go.
is probably because we have free will.
Exactly.
Right.
You're exactly right.
If we didn't have free will, we would have to play the game as optimally as possible and do everything correctly. So because we have free will, we have the ability to deviate from what is optimal or right. And it's not that we have the ability, we will inevitably do so. Because
we do so.
Right.
Exactly.
So when you do that and you take maybe a good thing or something in its purest state, right, in its purest metaphysical state, it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, but we will always deviate from that. We'll always be able to find the good things. We'll be able to take bad things and make good out of them, and bad things out of good things as well. So what that does is that guarantees that there's always going to be more or less evil in the world, because again, we're able to deviate from what we're supposed to do. So because of that deviation, you get the churches as institutions being less than ideal things, or a good thing like unions being less than an ideal thing. And this is sort of an accumulative effect. Like, this is why, one of the reasons why I'm a real big libertarian is because I don't believe that man is fit to wield power over other men. I think that's a fool's game. You will always get more evil. You cannot do net good with evil. At least, I'm sorry, you can't do a net good with power as a fallible man.
Well, let me say something with that.
Yeah.
We see that in biblically. God gave that opportunity. They messed it up.
Yeah.
So he said, so that's another reason why, again, Jesus had to come. And so now when Jesus comes, it's to change the heart of man. And that goes back to the love of God that you were talking about. That should lead us and be a part of us. But, okay, Judges. You ever read Judges in the Bible?
I've read through the Bible, but
Judges is a big part of man, ruling over man. You had judges that judged,
right?
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
And that didn't work.
Yeah, I do.
That didn't work.
It is very evident that man does not have the innate ability to produce a net good while ruling over man. Like I think that leads to inevitable ruin and the accumulation of evil. Any amount of power, when used, even if it's used in pursuit of good, will always, kind of like entropy, will always result in more evil than the good that it achieves. You can't, like, for example, protect the innocent and feed the hungry without doing more evil to produce that tiny amount of good. Like, in order to, because power is coercion, right? If I didn't have to ask you to, power is making people do things that they otherwise wouldn't have, right? So by definition, if I'm trying to clothe the naked and feed the hungry, I have to then go rob from other people in order.
Robin Hood is that?
Yeah, you have to tax. You have to tax other people who otherwise wouldn't. And like some of the most beautiful things that I've seen, like an allegory for Christianity or godly behavior, is everyone has like those really long spoons and they feed each other. But the beauty of that isn't that everyone gets fed, it's that everyone loves one another enough to want to feed each other. There's no archon there saying you have to feed this person or that. There's no design. It just manifests out of the goodness of people's hearts. So I don't think that the use of power can achieve that, right? Because if you do achieve the same material ends with power, it by de facto is evil, right? So I don't.
You're exactly right. But can I give you in scripture where that happened, what you just explained? This person fed this person fed each other because they just wanted to do it, right? No one made them do it. There was no rules. There was no laws that said this is what you had to do. I think that takes us back to what you kept talking about today, the love of Christ.
Right.
Okay, so, but we see that in the early church, though. In Acts, the first chapter, that's what they did. Nobody made them do it. Nobody told them to have to do it. What they did is if you go into Acts the 2nd chapter, you'll see where it talks about everyone sold what they had so they can share, what they got from that, so everyone will have everything in common. So no one will be lacking. No one made them do that. No one told them to do that. They did it on their own.
Yeshua was very not materialistic as a guy. He just made things very simple. People would say, "Hey, I'd like to follow you, but I got this job." He said, "Sell your crap."
Yeah.
Come, and he meant follow not in like the Twitter sense, but like
No.
literally walk around.
Come on, yeah, let's go. Well, let's look at the rich young ruler. And this is what I see in our modern day culture today. So the rich young ruler, young man, goes to Christ and says, "I want to follow you. What must I do to be holy or whatever?" And Jesus tells him, "Well, keep the commandments of the law." He said, "Well, I've done all these things from my childhood." So Jesus tells him, "Well, go sell all your stuff and then come." And it says he has this, like, he didn't want to do that.
Right.
But it's not that. And then a lot of people took it out of context and said, "Well, where I come from, where I grew up at anyway," took it out of context. Well, you're not supposed to have money. You're not supposed to be rich. And that's not what he was saying.
That's not
what Jesus was telling him was that he says, "Come follow me, but there's one thing you're missing." His faith was in his money, not in Christ.
Right.
His money had him.
Yeah, love of money.
Yeah, that's what the problem was. The money wasn't the problem. And then the thing, we know how Jesus was. He could read, he could see the hearts of man.
He was very empathetic.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I don't think anyone else, I don't think that Jesus himself, the man, was working with anything particularly different than what you and I are made out of. So
exactly right.
I think that just because Jesus could empathize with people doesn't mean that it's not available to others or not expected of others either.
It's not. You're right.
So I think that...
You're exactly right.
So, yeah, going back to kind of the core of Christianity, because we had this conversation before we scheduled this.
Yeah.
The core of Christianity comes down to the redeeming love of Christ. And we had sort of, I wouldn't even call it a debate, it was more of a discussion about whether the life of Christ can be separate from the love of Christ. And my opinion is that, yes, the life of Christ is not necessarily integral to the love of Christ. You can experience the love of Christ, the same love that saves your soul that Christ exhibited, without examining the life of Christ. I think, for example, what that means in practice is that a particularly good Buddhist is going to understand what you mean spiritually when you make your compelling case or your explanation about what behavior saves your soul, what makes you spiritually fulfilled. I think that's sort of a universal language. That's something that all good people are converging towards, whether they do so through examining the life of Siddhartha Buddha or Yeshua of Nazareth or possibly even Muhammad. We can dicker about the incidental differences between those religions, but ultimately they are pursuing the salvation of people's souls. And through the salvation of people's souls, there's also a transcendent of the material evils and material states of the world. So there was a keen point about the difference in perfection as we think of it and perfection as it is. And this is probably one of the reasons why the Jewish people didn't want to let go of their idea of perfection. Their main criticism of Yeshua of Nazareth, who was claiming, perfection, was that if you were perfect, I would have no worldly problems, right? All of those would go wrong or go away. And that worldly perfection is not a possibility in this life. That's a logical contradiction. And in fact, perfection, the pursuit of that worldly ideal of perfection contradicts itself logically. You can't have a perfect life. You can't have a worldly perfect life at all. Like if you attain one thing, you automatically lose several others. So the perfection that Christ and also in Buddhism, the kind of perfection that they taught about was a perfection that was, rather than attained, was realized. You can't attain perfection, but you can realize it. And that goes into you mentioned the concept of the Godhead. And that is a very touchy topic, because most people practice Christianity from an institutional standpoint. It's just their heritage. That's the only reason why they do that. They don't know Yeshua of Nazareth. They don't understand the love of Christ. They understand their hereditary identity, and they understand, my side's the best side, and they know brand value, and they know sports teams and stuff like that. You see that replete throughout plenty of preachers and plenty of other people. They want you on their side, but there's no discussion on spirituality in essence. Like they don't do.
Well, and that's why I asked that question, because I believe we are spiritual beings.
Yeah.
First, that's to me, that's first, and then all these other things, as you're talking about the physical and that, the world that we live in, money and the cars and everything, that.
Philosophers have been thinking about this problem since there have been philosophers, the metaphysical versus the physical. And we see it in engineering, right? We see it in hardware, rendering software, and software, right? So that's a very common trope. And I would agree with you. I think that human beings are mostly metaphysical. And this goes into a really interesting topic of the origin and nature of consciousness. I talked with Alan about this. He was very insightful, unsurprisingly. But human beings are intelligent. We're the only species that exhibits intelligence, at least on our scale, right? We have this time scale that's locked into this human lifespan, and there's also spatial scale. So there might be intelligence exhibited on scales that we're just not sensitive to. Like stars could, for example, be intelligent on scales that are on the scale of millions of years and hundreds of millions of kilometers and so on and so forth. But we're the only animal on our scale that we notice that exhibits intelligence. And my argument about intelligence is that intelligence is really meta consciousness. So it's like we have a hardware layer where our brain, just from a hardware layer, is able to generate a consciousness. And we also have a metaphysical software layer. Our it's called qualia in psych.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You do editing?
Yeah, I can do editing.
I need to rest for it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.